So this video is a quick guide for things you should be thinking about when looking at evaluate or does the data show questions. The skills gained through doing data analysis are really important for the future in employment, problem solving, and because you've got to learn and be able to use them and practice it, you've got to be self-motivated to do that. So this list of rules you might not have noticed, but it's actually in the front of your data booklet, the very first thing. And these are things you should be thinking about when approaching each task. So you need to sort of test yourself on them to make sure you know that they're there, whether that's through flashcards or just making sure you tick these off every time you see a question. So if the question says evaluate or does the data show, and it's worth about 3, 4, possibly 5 marks, then you've got to make sure you put both for and against the argument or the question that's there. Often people forget to put the obvious things, which is what we've got by the first 2 points here. So has a mean increased or decreased? Is there a positive or negative correlation to support the statement? And then if you can try and explain why that might be the case, so why a mean might have gone up or why there might be a positive correlation to answer the question, there's sometimes 2 marks in it for that, for agreeing because the basic data shows it. And then there's often a lot of things which are either could be for or could go against depending on what they show. Sometimes we've got standard deviation or error bars. So if they've got, if they overlap, then you do not have a significant increase or decrease. If they don't overlap, then you do have a significant increase or decrease. It's better to use whether it's risen significantly or decreased significantly rather than just using the word difference. Another thing to think about is have they got a statistical test. This is often a negative mark point, so they don't. So have they done a t-test to see if there's a significant difference between means? Or have they done a correlation coefficient like Spearman's rank to see if the correlation is significant? Or have they included a p-value in there to see if what you're looking at is significant? So that's an often against point that's often not included in questions. Have they performed it over a long period of time? So if it's a drug trial, have they just trialled it for a couple of weeks or a couple of months? Do you know what the effects would be like in a year or in a couple of years' time? Have they used a large sample size? It's very hard to get a definitive number, but less than 20 is definitely a small sample size which would not be representative. If you're talking hundreds, then it would be a large sample size, so it would be representative. Often the test will be carried out on cells or other organisms. So if it's carried out on other animals, then they could have different physiology, they could react differently to the drugs, so you can't necessarily say that you have the same effect on humans. Same if you've got isolated cells or tissues grown in a petri dish, for example, if they're being tested on, it could have a very different effect on the whole organism, on the whole human. Have they used a control or something to compare your results with? This isn't always relevant, so especially if you're looking for a relationship between two things, a control isn't always sort of needed. But if you're looking for a difference between means, then a control is often useful. Can you prove that the effect is due to the new drug that you're using, for example? If you've got very large range or standard deviations, it can often indicate that the data is unreliable. So you'd need more data to be able to say that you have got reliable data. Do ranges overlap? You don't often get range bars, and it is a different answer you need to say than standard deviation bars. So if the ranges overlap, then it just means that not all within the 2 different populations are different. Could the results be due to another factor, especially if you're looking at a correlation? So if you've got a positive correlation, that doesn't necessarily mean causation, it could be due to another factor. And then try and list some other factors from your biological knowledge that could also cause a similar response. And sometimes in a question, if you look at the bottom one here, what you're measuring could be subjective. So different people might have been given different pain medication, and they might have been asked to give a pain score. Of course, that's subjective. Also, if you think back to required practical 1, where you're measuring the time taken for the cross to disappear with the milk, that's again subjective when you see the cross. So that can mean that the results are unreliable as well, or not very accurate. So hopefully, if you know these 12 steps as you're going through and you're thinking about about this. It won't be the case that it's marks all the time, but it should give you the majority of the marks to go on. If you ever get an evaluate question, or does the data suggest and it's worth 4 marks, try and include at least 5 or 6 points.